thoughtfully posted. They are thoughtfully. Don't scratch your beard. They are. Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, the King Bee.
Gene yelled at me today.
And this is The Watch, where we look back at this week's episode of True Detective and go over the top listener emails and voicemails for the week. And we've got a ton this week. Just as a reminder, what we read on the podcast is truncated for time, so you can read these emails in their entirety at shatontv.com. They are thoughtfully posted by Big D Dick Ebert for your reading enjoyment. Also, we do read and respond to all of your emails, so look forward to a response from us there. This week's emails and voicemails span everything from car models and makes to literary references. So let's get started. The first one is a juicy one from a guy who knows Nic Pizzolatto personally. This one comes from Josh Fontenot, and he writes in, "Guys, I just came across your podcast this week and went through your coverage of Season 3. Love the podcast. On Season 6, one of y'all made comments on Nick and how insufferable he comes across, and it compelled me to share some personal childhood evidence to support this. Also, some fun facts about names and locations. So Nick and I went to the same Catholic high school. He's a grade younger. With 60 in each grade, we definitely knew each other. I'm not talking shit more than stating facts that you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone who actually liked him. He was a talented artist at the time and young age and was overly confident and rather arrogant in his abilities and never held back in ranking anyone else's artwork, drawings, writing, etc. In short, he was an asshole, but we all thought he was talented. Some fun facts about our hometown and how much the hometown and names are used throughout Season 1. Lake Charles is where we grew up. I'm a Fontenot, but there's thousands of us, so I don't hold any thoughts that I was even on his mind when he created the Fontenot girl murder victim. But we did have one family of Cordishes who was another victim's name. Our school was called Lady Queen of Heaven, and Season 1 had Our Lady Queen of Angels. I'm certain that's direct connection. Season 3 had the Ardoin character, who's also a very common Cajun last name. He did get locations correct with the meth lab location and how close Houston is to Lake Charles. For all of us, it's been great to have our names and locations be so prominent on such an amazing Season 1. Love the podcast, Josh Fontenot."
You know, nothing makes me happier than having my suspicions about famous people confirmed. I think that's fantastic. I love this story. Thank you so much for writing in.
I don't blame Nick after knowing that, just from the sense that I knew a lot of people. I've worked in a couple small towns in my newspaper career, and I knew lots of people who were super talented and just never got out of those towns. And they developed a disdain for the people around them. Not saying, Josh, that you're trash or anything. Just saying that, you know, if Nick had this artistic fire burning inside him and knew he was better than other people around him, specifically in those areas, I could see where that would make him kind of a super dick.
Those who are the best in their field or highly excel in whatever it is they do are typically not real pleasant people socially to be around. It's that focus and that drive to so intensely and passionately pursue a thing that you kind of just shirk every other thing that kind of goes along with being not a fucking asshole on this planet. So, again, it just kind of fits the picture that we've painted for ourselves here.
Josh, we've got at least 2 weeks of coverage left on this podcast. So if you could write in with any other Nic Pizzolatto stories, I don't think we're ever going to get an interview with him. So this will be the closest we can get. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next up, we have an email from Amy Smith. Amy writes in, "Hey guys, I lived in Arkansas my whole life and am so intrigued over this show. Have you looked at the Morgan Nick disappearance? There were lots of attempted kidnappings and missing kids during this time. The satanic fever was hot during this time. Remember the West Memphis 3? Tyson Foods is obviously the Hoyt Chicken Factory. Westfinger is obviously West Fork. Roland is the name of a town in Arkansas relating to Morgan Nick. Also Spiro, Oklahoma. Spiral. There was a state trooper or cop missing, and the remains were found in Iowa last year, if I remember correctly. Purcell was an attorney general of Arkansas around the time Bill Clinton was. I could go on and on about the eerie similarities. Maybe Julie is Morgan Nick? My grandfather-in-law was an Arkansas state trooper in this area at the time. He died last year with no kids, and have convinced myself he knew about this and the crooked politicians and wealthy residents here. His wife is still alive. She's 95 and mentally sharp. I need to ask her. And that comes from Amy Smith.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a ton of analogs that are to be found. I mean, the guy really writes about what's going on currently. I've mentioned a few times in the cast about, the current fascination with true crime and how that's a huge portion of this season that we're watching now. You know what? I think you need to put up one of those cork boards and start making the connections. You could do a real life True Detective for us.
I mean, some of the best TV that we've seen on HBO, Showtime, and other premium networks has been written by people who have real knowledge of things in certain areas. And I think the best example of that is The Wire. David Simon, working for the Baltimore Sun, had a lot of source material just from real life. Real life does make some of the best, fiction. I don't fault Nic Pizzolatto from really digging into an area. And I do find, especially coming from Arizona, I do find places like Arkansas, like Louisiana, really fascinating because it's just, we have such a sanitized world out here relative to the Appalachia and the South.
Hey, thanks for writing in. Keep us updated on your bulletin board post there.
All right, next up we have one from Jason. Jason is writing in about the book transcription. Now, if you listened to 2 episodes ago, I sat down and wrote down everything I could take off the TV screen from Amelia's book that Wayne was reading through and Roland found on his desk. Got a really disappointing email from Jason today. He says, "Hey guys, I love the podcast and have been listening since Westworld Season 1, including that Tom Hardy show. I just got around to listening to your latest episode that covers True Detective Episode 7, The Final Country. I have some bad news about the book, including the car crash and Ed. I was browsing the True Detective subreddit, always a bad idea, I know, and I came across a thread about that book passage that was shown on screen. Someone said it might just be lazy props department, and that part of the passage, the car accident part, is actually from an existing book. And then he provides a link, which we'll share on Shat on TV. I thought you might want to take a look before theorizing any further about the relevancy of what happens on those pages. And following that link, I went in and took a look, and there's a book called The Woman in the Window, which basically talks about a woman who sees something she shouldn't have seen, and she's an alcoholic. I don't know if it's any relation, but basically the left page of Amelia's book is from The Woman in the Window, then the right page is not. So it looks like either they had a lazy props department, or again, Pizzolatto is trying to pay homage to this 2018 book, The Woman in the Window.
Yeah, you know what? Taking a step back, I also refer to it as that Tom Hardy show, which was about how much I enjoyed it as well. Boy, I really wish you could have come through a little sooner with this. We really racked our brains and probably put in a combined 3 hours of time kind of fanficking where this would fit in and how it matched the story. I'm never going to start going to Reddit to look for these answers. I'm glad we've got listeners to do it for us. Thanks for looking that up. I guess we can put that one to bed.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a lazy props department. I could see this being a sort of like a buddy thing. Like, hey, I'm going to promote your book and as an Easter egg in my show. But fuck, did it throw us off? Because I was like, okay, episode 8, the finale, we're going to see a car crash. Ed's going to be waving a phone around. Like, we got this on lock. And not so much. Which would explain why Becca is not dead.
We still don't know what's happening to her.
All right, thanks, Jason, for your email. Next up, we have one from Sean. Speaking of attention to detail, Sean writes in, "Hey guys, I'm not sure if I'm a car guy reading too much into the show, but in episode 6 at 33 minutes, Hayes and West meet Dan O'Brien at the diner. When Dan leaves, we see him driving away in a 5.0 Mercury Capri, I believe either a 1979 or 1980 model. The Mercury line is basically Ford, but Mercury is the entry-level premium brand. Basically exactly the same as Ford, but just marketed as a luxury version. It's the same as Lexus and Toyota, where Lexus is all Toyota parts, but it's a luxury brand. In episode 7, at 17 minutes in, they arrive at the motel. The policeman in the car waiting tells them it's a 1978 Mercury Capri, and then the license. Now, this might just be regular Hollywood production stuff. Who would really know a 78 from a 79 or an 80 Capri? But this is such a dumb mistake. If you look at the links I provided, it's clear that a new model was introduced in 1979, possibly more recognizable as the Ford Mustang from 79 to 93. We know that the kids went missing in 80. I posit it's possible Dan O'Brien profited from selling or giving up the children or helping the kidnapper, just like it seems Lucy did. Lucy goes to Vegas and parties with her money. What does Dan do? Goes out and buys a top-of-the-line luxury model Mercury Capri hot rod. This panning out would require the policeman to be in on the lie somehow, or it's an innocent mistake that gets discovered later down the line. Doubtful. Or I'm just reading too much into it as a car guy. Cheers, Sean.
Sean, in my heart of hearts, I want nothing more than for you to sound just like Marissa Tomei reading this letter to me from my cousin Vinny. I mean, listen, clearly this is a man who loves his cars. I don't think it has anything to do with the show. Don't think your theory is going to plan out, but I'm impressed with your knowledge there.
One thing Sean's email did tip me off to, though, is that I had posited that Dan had a brown car when he was leaving the diner, and we knew that a brown sedan had been seen around when the children disappeared and when Will died. The Mercury Capri is not a sedan, it is a coupe. Therefore, it is not the car that was seen because it's not a sedan. So thanks for that, Sean. That model of Mustang and the Capri are much maligned by car enthusiasts who don't like that kind of that fastback look to it. I thought those were cool as hell. And I took a trip once to New Mexico, to Moriarty, New Mexico, in one of those Mustang fastbacks, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had. It is a beast of a car. So thanks for tipping us off, Sean.
Oh, you smooth talker, you.
Positive. All right, next up we have one from Ben. He says, "Hey guys, thanks for featuring me on the pod. The day I heard you read my letter, I found out I'll be on Jeopardy in a couple months. You guys are my good luck charm. Brilliant breakdown this week. Here's what I'm at after listening. After Isabel loses her daughter, she's so devastated, she makes contact with Hoyt's biological daughter, Julie. Daddy Hoyt enables this bizarre affection, justifying it along with the following lines. 1, he's giving Julie the creature comfort she lacks at home. 2, she is, like Isabel's lost child, his biological descendant, and so he sees himself to having a claim to her. 3, it's the only thing that can, at least at first, aid his daughter's bereft insanity. But over time, Isabel's affection deepens, becoming a worrying fixation, eventually leading to an attempted kidnapping, which results in Will's death. Old Ed will basically attempt to rationalize his choices to Wayne in the car before telling him there's nothing he can do to make any of this right, except, Wayne realizes, to find Julie. All the best, and thanks again, Ben."
You know, I've given a lot of thought to whether or not Julie is in fact a Hoyt or not. Does it make a difference to me in the story? I don't think it does. It would tie things a little bit tighter if there was that sort of genetic connection. But ultimately, I kind of hope it doesn't. I don't really, and I think we'll talk about this in other emails. I don't really need everything to be bound up in such a tiny little box. You know, I don't think there needs to be such strong connections between every character. But it's one of those things where we just have to wait and see.
I think we all talked about the fact that Julie was going over, maybe visiting the Hoyt home, and that eventually maybe she made the decision to join them or was not allowed to go back to the Purcells. This is a little bit of a different take, which is essentially that, you know, maybe Hoyt was okay with Isabel playing mom and maybe okay with her, you know, hanging out with this kid, or maybe Hoyt wasn't okay with it, but was allowed it to go to a certain degree. And Isabel on her own, maybe with Mr. June, decided to pull off this kidnapping or something to that effect. And so basically kind of going against Hoyt's wishes. But once Will is dead, there's no really going back from that point. I could see that being the case. It's something I hadn't considered before. But the paternity of Julie, I also think is, you know, they do call it into question intentionally in the show, but I don't think it's something that's going to be resolved in this season. I don't think they're ever going to answer that question. I am excited to see what is said between Ed and Wayne in this car. I think that this is going to be, I mentioned in a previous podcast, I think it's going to be a critical scene in the history of True Detective. I think it's going to be a real big one. And I hope that Rooker has the acting chops to pull it off. I'm a little concerned about that.
He's the one-handed guy from Walking Dead, right?
Right. He's also in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I think he can do it. I got faith in him. After just that dialogue, and don't you think I've been patient enough with you up to this point? I think he's going to have what it takes. I mean, he's been a bit actor for quite some time, and a lot of times those bit actors really have some serious chops as far as just falling into the character that they normally are, and just being real natural with it. So I've got a real positive outlook on this.
I got a weird feeling that it's going to get super racist, though.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. It's gonna be absolutely that. I do secretly hope at some point he goes, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all," because that was my favorite part from Guardians 2.
Was that his last words?
It was some of his last words. "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all."
All right, thanks for writing in, Ben. Next up, we've got one from Stu. Writes in, "Hello, Shat team. Love True Detective. Yes, even season 2, which always reminds me of a really abstract oil painting. Pleased that you've done a podcast on it. You really should do the Fargo TV series if they do another season. Season 1 and 3 are exceptional.
Season 2 is the best television ever made, clown shoes."
The central theme of memory in this series of True Detective is fascinating. They're doing a great job of showing how over time a story gets retold, parts of it forgotten or repressed. Wayne is doing a lot of this to save himself from pain. Other parts embellished, or indeed some parts never told. Tied in with this is what the audience choose to see, remember, and how we recall the story in True Detective. For example, you guys immediately labeled Cousin Dan a pervert based on nothing, and that the hole drilled in the wall was a peephole, also made by Dan. I felt that the job was too sloppy to be that of a seasoned pervert. Shavings were left in a pile on the floor, and it was on Will's side, which perhaps makes it more likely to have been drilled from Julie's side. Big D also stated, matter-of-factly, that there was no evidence of notes having been folded, but when I first saw them, I felt they had clearly been rolled. There were creases. Also, the hole was always big enough. When Roland first looks through it, the light covers his iris. So interesting what we choose to see and remember. I realize that this series is released in episodes, but it makes more sense to view it as a single 8-hour film. Comments on which episode is best or worst is a terrible approach. Everything is connected, and it should be viewed on what has come before and what comes after. Comments on how the episodes link together are more valid. And that comes from Stu G in New Zealand.
Stu, for some reason or another, do they not play season 2 of Fargo in New Zealand? Is it the flying saucers or something? Is it a government thing? I know they don't let games with mature ratings out in Australia. What's going on here? I love Carrie Coon in season 3. Ramona Flowers, total babe. But season 2 is by far and above the best season of those 3 seasons. What's going on there? Please write me personally. Let's get down to the bottom of this.
Stu does bring up a good point about prejudices and our own heuristic. So a heuristic, if you're not familiar, is basically a mental shortcut, and humans use them all the time. You don't take the time to process every bit of information that you're seeing. It's what allows us to operate at the speed that we do. Otherwise, everything would be pondering the thing you're looking at. A great reference to this is in Game of Thrones when Syrio Forel is talking to Arya, and he mentions that you need to see the thing with your eyes before you process it with your mind. You're absolutely right. You know, we made a lot of assumptions while watching this, and some of that's the show. I mean, Cousin Dan looks like a pervert, but it doesn't mean he is a pervert. And people jump to conclusions all the time in the show. So getting back to that name, True Detective, it's about cutting through that. And I think they do a great job of showing how Wayne and Roland see the world a little bit differently than the audience who's watching the TV show.
Everyone is some kind of criminal. They're just waiting to find out which one it is and narrow it down. They're hunters. Naturally, they're going to look at this thing. And I mean, maybe that's the antithesis of what they're supposed to do, you know, according to Mahershala's dialogue in this last episode about, you know, assumptions creating narratives. But yeah, no, come on. That guy was a cretin. Anyone looking at him could tell. Same that anyone can just look at me and tell that I'm a miserable human being. So I don't think that we're wrong in making those assumptions. This is an actor that was portraying this.
Thanks a lot for your email, Stu. Go watch season 2 of Fargo again. Next one comes from Jack. He says, I predicted to my girlfriend in episode 2 that Hoyt may be after a replacement for his granddaughter. We learned early that she had died as a child. It seems to be a possible motive. After learning about Hoyt's daughter Isabel, it seems likely that she donned the brown Mercedes and ghost costume, along with June Watts, her caretaker, to find a lookalike for her own deceased daughter. Hoyt facilitated it so his family could be whole, and the show sets us up to think they were using her sexually, when in reality it was more personal. I did not expect the show to address Rust and Marty beyond the brief picture we saw a few episodes ago. It made me realize that there must be something deeper, because although child abuse and pedophilia are recurring themes for the show, the mystery has been more nuanced this season specifically. The fourth wall break element of the interview did, however, give me a reason to pause and consider just how involved the Attorney General has been with the Purcell case. Seems like he's there at every moment something goes wrong just to say, let's end it now and move on. Could be total tinfoil, but who knows?
I mean, I don't think that's tinfoil at all. I think it's evidence of powerful reach that whoever this perpetrator is has over what's going on. And I think we're already kind of getting hints of that from last episode.
Yeah, I hope the Rust and Marty thing is more than just fan service. I was a little disappointed that they called it out that much. And I could just imagine True Detective fanboys being like, oh, yeah, look, it's Rust and Marty. You know, like they do with the Star Wars movies. By the way, watch Solo while folding laundry the other day. That is one terrible movie.
Did you rate it so low?
You know, Netflix just does the thumbs up, thumbs down now. It was definitely a thumbs down. I almost fell asleep while folding laundry, which is one of my favorite activities.
That's one of your favorite activities?
Folding laundry?
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I've known this guy 24 years. This is a new thing I'm learning today. He never ceases to bore the shit out of me.
Yeah, but I agree with the King Bee. It's not tinfoil. I think that the Attorney General is definitely trying to shut things down. Now, whether that motivation is to calm down people and get his job done for political aspirations is one thing. Whether he's in Hoyt's pocket is something entirely different. But I think we've seen that Hoyt has considerable reach. The fact that he's willing to roll around in 2 black sedans in town and intimidate police officers means he's got to feel that he's got his bases covered. Thanks, Jack, for your email. Next one comes up from Zachary, and it's about Roland and careerism. Zachary writes, I love the pod. I'm not buying the Roland being closeted theory and that being the reason he and Wayne stopped talking to each other. My take is Roland and Wayne had their falling out because in the 1990 timeline, Wayne uncovers the fact that Roland was involved in a conspiracy to pin the case on Woodard back in 1980. So Roland knew about the planted bag and chose to advance his career over getting to the truth. Wayne doesn't remember this in the 2015 timeline. Ultimately, I think Roland will redeem himself in some way by the end of the season. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Zachary.
I'm kind of with you on the closeted thing. Regardless of whether or not he is or isn't, I don't think it's important to the show. There's a really great scene in an episode of The Newsroom where the news host is really giving it to a Republican homosexual candidate and just laying into the guy about being okay with whatever's going on in his party because he happens to be a homosexual. And the guy rips him a new asshole and says, how dare you confine me to just one thing? And I've really been thinking about that a lot because I think, you know, as an uninteresting white dude, I am really excited and interested in seeing different types of people portrayed in stories and media because I think it is a refreshing and needed change. But I don't think that a person should be reduced to just one thing. And I don't think Roland just needs to be the closeted homosexual cop. I think that it can be sort of hinted at or implied, and that's all you really need to make it the whole of his character kind of cheapens the work as a whole. I personally think that the division between them has more to do with the fact that Roland is alone now, when at one point he was living with a woman, and you know, we don't know how the conversations go. We know Hoyt is having a conversation with Wayne right now. When did Roland get this phone call? If Roland got this phone call, what's used against him? Could that be why he's alone today? And it's easy to start drawing lines and saying it's because of this and because of that. I think the details to me are getting less and less important as the story progresses, that I'm still more looking at the overall mood or tone of the show to mean more than the, you know, I guess the factual details and minutia of each character.
I think it's safe to say that both Roland and Wayne are going to pay a big price for this Harris James thing, and that is what is driving a wedge or two. Again, we only have one episode left here, so we're going to have to get some conclusions really quickly. And I think the fact that they inserted Ed Hoyt at this point in the storyline, basically he wins, and both these guys are going to pay a really steep price for it. I don't see them in 2015 like wrapping this all up in one episode, unless the resolution is really just the memory of what happened and Wayne ultimately giving up. I think that would be a fitting ending. I think that'd be a really poetic and beautiful ending, honestly.
What if the big division between them is simply the fact that Wayne doesn't fucking remember what they lost and Roland does? That would piss me off. Whew.
All right, thanks for your email. Next up, we have one from JC. JC writes, you guys consistently miss the promised release days of your most recent reviews for your current subject, True Detective. Disappointing to say the least. It is okay if you guys can't do it until Wednesday, but just say so. Otherwise, I appreciate your in-depth analysis. Don't miss touching on the look in the barn between Harris and Dorf. JC.
Moving forward, all podcasts will be released on Wednesday, possibly Thursday. We might just treat you on a Tuesday.
So I hate to make excuses for things, but we do have to work around doing movies and TV. I was on a business trip to Philadelphia this week, so the King Bee and I actually recorded on Sunday immediately after watching the show, and I took the edit with me, thinking, "Hey, it's a quick edit, won't be too bad." But I succumbed to slumber, JC. I couldn't stay awake late nights after hours and hours of meetings in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania.
Send me your PayPal. I'll happily refund you the balance owed.
But my take on this, and Big D and I were talking about this. What I love about this though is that I can see JC sitting there and like hitting refresh, and the podcast just isn't showing up. And man, I do apologize. We make it a point to be consistent and have it out every Tuesday. I think we were a few hours late on this one. It crept in a Wednesday morning, and I do apologize for that. King B was literally sending me messages that showed up the next day in Slack that were like, "Wake up, don't fall asleep, wake up." It felt very Nightmare on Elm Street. So JC, I apologize. It was my fault. I take all the blame. Also, I don't know about consistently. I think we missed it one time. We always release on Tuesday.
Look for it on Wednesdays now.
Thanks, JC, for your email. Next up, we've got one from Peter. I was writing about Mr. June and Mary July. He says, "Hey guys, been enjoying the podcast on True Detective, working long hours lately and powering through the busy work by listening to way too many True Detective podcasts. Maybe people are discussing this somewhere on Reddit, but I am really surprised that none of the podcasts are talking about the fact that True Detective has a character named June and another character calling herself July. This does not seem like something that would be a coincidence. Discuss among yourselves, Peter."
All right, we're going to shut down the podcast and discuss this amongst ourselves. We'll be back in just a moment.
Now, Peter, actually, Big D had a totally different idea. He was like, well, a witness remembered her calling herself Mary July. Maybe it was Mary June, and she was having the same last name as Mr. June because they felt like they were family. But we do have a second witness, the first guy that actually tips off about Mary July, who clearly also says that it was like July. I think it's closer to Julie July. Dude, when we were watching this episode together, the King Bee, Carrie Gross, and I did say, whoa, June, July? Weird, but I couldn't really make much more sense out of it than that.
I mean, I could easily see a man caring for a small kid and introducing himself as Mr. June, and then eventually as they become friends, it's a fun game and she becomes Mrs. July. It's just, what a kid would do. I mean, if she's, being kept in this little pink room like a princess, it would make sense that she would begin to, sort of create a narrative for herself where she gets to be someone new.
What remains to be seen is how Julie leaves this compound, right? Is she forced out? Does she escape? Is she just let go? I really hope that we do get to see what happens there because I'm very curious. It's, it seems like a pretty secure place.
Maybe she just grew up and got no fun. I mean, here's the thing. If Isabel passes away, why are we keeping her around? The girl, Julie.
Right.
Hoyt, in my guesstimation, only took her for Isabel. And at this point, if Isabel passes away or just goes to that next level of crazy and doesn't want an adult woman around, then it just makes sense that they kind of just get rid of her.
I could see that. Next, we have one from our old friend Tom from Chicago who writes in, "Guys, can't believe we're reaching the end of True Detective 3 already, and I am really hoping for a strong end of the season. After that, I'll be back to Young Sheldon and NCIS Milwaukee. Just a quick point on your discussion of the gay element of the story. I think given the time period, the 80s and 90s, a lot of people perceive being gay on par with being a child molester. I think the show gives good context into the public morals at the time. As an epilogue to my comment, sadly, I know gay men who lived a lot of their adult life during that era and are still having issues about being open about the orientation, aka Roland. Finally, I am not looking forward to American Gods, best looking worst show on TV, but I will watch it as a very good aperitif to your great podcast. Next year, please consider looking at doing a review show on The Handmaid's Tale or even Young Sheldon, LOL. Best, Tom from Chicago."
If you had to binge watch Young Sheldon, American Gods, or Handmaid's Tale, which would you watch?
Oh, I do Handmaid's Tale in a heartbeat.
Okay. What if you had to watch two?
Handmaid's Tale and American Gods.
Okay. What if one of them had to be Young Sheldon?
Handmaid's Tale and Young Sheldon.
How did Young Sheldon get made? Can someone tell me what's...
Well, The Big Bang Theory is the number one show on TV, I believe, or if it isn't, it was for a very long time. You strike while the iron's hot, and you make Young Sheldon.
I mean, listen, I want to say America, I hate you, but it seems really reductive and silly to say that in response to a television show when who wrote this email?
This is Tom from Chicago.
Tom from Chicago is absolutely right in like what, American culture did to homosexual people and the way it kind of portrayed them. That's the absolute truth. You really hit the nail on the head. And I would even go so far as to say more than just assigning it to a time and a place, decades ago. There are a lot of people that feel like that today. So it's very, very understandable. Yeah, man, it's just brutal to think about what people do to each other. I think I'm going to go cry for a little while now.
Well, Big D touched on it earlier this season when we were talking about the homosexuality and saying how, I said, I'd love to see them include what 80s gay bars were like in Arkansas. And Big D's like, no, it'd be horrible, the amount of persecution, how you'd have to hide it. And there's a certain gravity to this email from Tom that really made me stop and consider what this meant at the time. Right now we're debating, is it okay for homosexuals to serve in the military or get married? And let's dial it back a second and remember that in the 80s and 90s, you could get strung out in the street and
you weren't even supposed to exist.
Right. Like you could lose your job. You could be socially ostracized. And now I think at least we're at a better place. But we really have to consider that era and what that meant. And, the show I think has done a great job of trying to do that. But we, being in our current time, might think, oh, that's not that big a deal. Thanks, Tom, for your email. Now for the voicemails for the week. We had a pair. The first one came from Jarrett from Ellington, Connecticut.
Hey, guys, this is Jared from Ellington, Connecticut. I'm listening to the latest episode you put out on episode 7 of True Detective. I listen to you guys all the time. The Shat on Movies podcast is awesome. You guys really fill my day. I'm like really, 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 really close to donating money. And I've never done that before to a podcast, but you guys are so awesome. I think I'm going to do it. All right. Keep doing what you're doing. We love it. Bye.
Hey, buddy. I really, 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 really think that's a great idea.
This to me is the most important kind of listener that we can have, is the ones that will jump from TV to movies. Because as a reminder, people who may not know the history of the podcast, we started off as a movies podcast and then on a fluke did Westworld as a TV show and then realized that we had an audience on TV as well. We never intended to make this a TV podcast. We have so much fun doing it and people keep listening in. But we always want to remind people that Shat the Movies is where we have the most fun. Shat the Movies is where it all started, where people can really be themselves. The TV analysis is just something we do on the side. But we appreciate the people who can kind of listen to us all year round with movies and TV. And again, if you'd like to join us on American Gods and Game of Thrones, that would be awesome too.
And that show with Tom Hardy.
Oh, and that show with Tom Hardy. Thanks, Jared. Next up, we have a voicemail from Tom W. in North Carolina.
This is Tom W. from North Carolina calling in, and I want to say, number one, I appreciate you guys. I do follow multiple casts. This one is for True Detective. When Amelia is at the orphanage and they focus in on the truck outside, the name on the truck is the boy's name that was with Julie when they were trick-or-treating. Gave up the information about the dolls. Early on in that first montage of pictures, the boys are surrounded by a tree, carving something into the tree. What would you say if I think that they were carving in the crooked circle? Not saying that they were evil in any way, but something that maybe one of the boys saw in their father's home and just replicating it on the tree. I think it was interesting to have that been put in, and I think that is going to come back at some point in the episode. Let me know what you guys think. It's just a little piece of it, but I think that there's more involved. I think that this may be a Hoyt conspiracy with fingers going down into the community, including, the trick-or-treat lady. And I think even Roland's girlfriend, I think she may have been a plant to sit there and watch him. They want to make you think that he may have had a relationship with Tom. But again, I think that's just he cares about Tom. But I think the reason why he never married is because he couldn't trust anybody, because he knew that the town was crooked. Let me know what you guys think. I know I'm putting a lot out in one call, but just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, Tom, I do think you're absolutely right that the Hoyt thing is a conspiracy. It's all been shown that he does have reaches into the community, and the guy, I think, to use the phrase, draws a lot of water in that town. I don't hope it's the crooked spiral thing, because I know that that's supposed to be sort of like a sex trade thing. Personally, I don't want this to be a sex thing. I want it to be just a crazy lady wants a daughter and the weird shit rich people do to make that happen sort of story. The sex thing is just sort of an after effect that comes from a slightly brainwashed girl being released on her own and not really knowing what to do with herself. I don't think Roland's wife or girlfriend is going to be used as a plant. I'm willing to bet $1 that she's not around because maybe Hoyt reveals some sort of proclivities that Roland may have had to her, and she just bounces on her own accord. Or maybe Roland has presented this evidence that it could be used against him and chooses to get rid of her on his own.
So the name that Tom is referring to on the side of the truck is Ardoin. Ash Schlafly from the Dana Buckler Show wrote in about this a few weeks ago, basically saying that the Ardoin family is related to the Purcell family in the sense that the kids were friends. We do see this name, pop up, and it does translate to home, which is interesting. I liked the idea that Ardoin rescued Julie somehow from this home for wayward women, and that she was living with him. It makes sense. He was there, doing the landscaping and stuff. Maybe he talked her into living with him, but I don't think that's the case. I do hope Julie's okay though. Having just another death in this show. There's a really high body count this season, and I think it's probably enough for now.
Yeah, I mean, the other 2 seasons have been such a bummer. It would be nice to see somebody get out of it alive this time.
Wait, you mean the baby at the end of season 2 didn't give you hope?
Oh, gee, I completely blocked that out. I forgot all about that baby.
We gotta have a baby, Frank. Gotta have a baby.
Do you think somewhere down Mexico way, that Frank's wife and that lady detective are just co-parenting a little baby Colin Farrell?
They're not even in Mexico.
They were in Mexico.
They were not in Mexico.
Where were they?
I have to Google it.
You're going to owe me $1.
It's not Mexico, but it is a country that's in the headlines these days.
Oh, is it Venezuela?
Venezuela.
Oh.
Give me $1.
I'll PayPal you later.
Okay. Not a sponsor. Anyway, thanks everyone for writing in, calling in. We appreciate your voicemails and emails, keeping the show going. Just a reminder to everyone, we have one more episode of the True Detective Season 3 deep dive before we do the season recap. That'll be coming out next Tuesday.
Wednesday for you, JC.
So keep an eye out for that. All right, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, True Detective. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. You can email us at hosts@shatontv.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail for the podcast, you can call us at 914-719-SHAT. That's 914-719-SHAT. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, the King Bee and Big D, Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for the True Detective Season 3 finale deep dive. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.